I say this every election cycle, and I'll say it again. The 2024 political field was intense, so don't get left behind in 2025. If you're running for office, the first thing on your to-do list should be securing your name on the web. With a yourname.vote domain from GoDaddy.com, you'll stand out and make your mark. Don't wait. Get yours today.
Sam and I are always talking about being prepared, whether it's hurricanes in Florida, earthquakes in California, flooding in Arizona, or supply chain disruptions.
Exactly, Chuck. When pharmacies shut down, it does not matter how tough you are, you still need access to critical medicine.
That's why we trust Jace Medical. The Jace case comes with 5 life-saving antibiotics and key over-the-counter meds, so you're covered when things get disrupted.
And Jace goes beyond just the Jace case. They also offer first aid kits, daily prescriptions, and long-term nutrition with Jace Pantry. Don't wait for the next hurricane warning or natural disaster. Take control of your health and peace of mind today.
Visit jace.com and use code FUTURE at checkout for $10 off your order. That's FUTURE at JASE.com.
Welcome to another episode of Breaking Battlegrounds with your host, Chuck Warren. I'm Sam Stone. Our first guest today, Jay Feely, congressional candidate in Arizona's Congressional District 1. Jay was a member of the 97 University of Michigan National Championship football team. That was an amazing team. Go Blue. Are you allowed to say that here with ASU?
Oh, I say it. No, it doesn't matter. I mean, I'm not changing who I am. I'm going to be transparent about it.
No, I love that because, I mean, look, I get that all the time, right? I'm a Red Sox guy. I'm a Boston guy, every Boston sport. And when I ran for office just for the city council a few years ago, everyone's like, well, you got to be an ASU fan. I'm like... Yeah,
well, I am an ASU fan. My son played at ASU for 2 years, so you can have some dual loyalties.
100%.
Luckily, they're not rivals either. It's not like Michigan, Ohio State.
But you can have...
What do you do if your son goes to Ohio State?
I told him he couldn't go there. I literally said, there's one school you can't go to. It's Ohio State.
You're disowned. It's called you're out of the will.
That's
right. So you're running for Congress in Arizona.
Yes.
Taking that big step out into the world of the Sharks. And NRCC had an amazing announcement about you. Tell us what's going on there.
Well, it's been a crazy journey, right, for me to start in CD5 in Gilbert, where we've lived since I came here in 2010 to play for the Cardinals. And running there, and then, to get asked by the president to switch districts, and then Speaker Johnson calls me and asks, and then the NRCC, and, I just said, if it's best for the party, I'll do it. And they felt like they didn't have anybody in that district running who could win the seat. And that was the priority. We know how important that seat is. It's going to be one of the 3 to 5 most important seats in the entire country to making sure we keep the majority. And so I said, yes, I'll do that. And then the NRCC just Monday made an announcement. They had 9 candidates in their MAGA majority that they made an announcement of, and they're going to support those candidates. They know how important they are to making sure that we keep the majority.
Well, and Chuck, you know this as well as I do. For anyone on our side who would criticize you for moving to a different district that you're running in now, the Democrats do this all the time. They play strategic. The point is to have good candidates in every race so that you actually hold the majority.
100%. I mean, the key is you got to win. In CD1,
you have to have a good candidate in CD1.
There's 3 congressmen right now in Arizona who don't live in their district.
Right.
So. I mean, didn't Juan Ciscomani tell me that Eli Crane's kids go to his kid's school?
Yes.
Yeah, he sees him.
You got Eli, you got Stanton.
He sees him in the carpool line.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What district does Stanton actually live in?
I think he's in mine.
Yeah, I do too.
Okay.
I think he's in CD1.
Yeah.
That actually. Well, I mean, like. All the downtown Democrats, the Phoenix downtown Democrats, all live in Scottsdale now. So, yeah, that makes sense.
Well, I feel very blessed, to have the support of the president, to have the support of the NRCC, and just sitting down and talking about strategically, looking at the fact that Democrats are going to spend probably $30 million on this seat. And looking at the fact that they believe, there's 3 to 5 seats that if they flip those seats, they know if they can flip my seat in CD1, Juan Ciscomani's seat, that they have a really good chance of winning the House. And we understand that as well. And that's why we have to put so many resources behind being able to spend and raise as much as they do, so that we're not losing because we don't spend as much as they do, getting the message out, having a message and a candidate whose story resonates. I think, the things that my wife and I have done and been committed to, we've talked about it here before, just our heart for people, that will resonate. You have to be able to win independents in this seat. A third of the voters in this seat are independent voters. And I think when they learn about the things that we've been committed to, the things that we've done in our lives to help other people, and that I believe is the fundamental basis of what you're supposed to do in office, is to create equal opportunities and pathways to success for everyone.
There are nominally independent voters in some districts where we just know it's a 60-40 split. They're really not swing voters, but CD1, those are real independents. They are swing voters who will go.
Well, they're candidate-driven.
They're candidate-driven.
That's right.
They're very
Because you'll see they'll vote for Trump and then vote for Gallego.
Right.
And you've seen that split over the last 10 years in that district.
I think Schweiker told us it's one of the higher educated.
So 54% of the constituents have college degrees, one of the highest in the country.
Yeah. So, they feel inclined to go through their ballot and pick who they feel comfortable with.
It's one of the wealthier districts in the entire country as well.
14,000 millionaires.
Yes. Where they focus on economics. Economics is the driving factor in this district.
So when you go around and meet with people, are all the questions economic, taxes, anything like that, or what are the other issues you hear about when you meet with
Election
people?
integrity as well. There's three main issues. It's border and security. It is economic issues, and then it's, with affordability in there. And then it's looking at the SAVE Act and making sure that we have elections that are secure.
So let me ask you this. Since you first started running for Congress, do you hear less by the month people talking about border security?
Absolutely.
Because the border's shut. I mean,
President Trump came in, and within a month, he was able to do what for 4 years Democrats said couldn't be done without a bill being passed, and that is shut the border. Now, I did go down to the border myself. We went down and did a visit there to look at it, and there's still a 26-mile gap that has no wall, that has no roads, that you can't get in. Border Patrol can't even get in there to make sure that it's secure. Like, the fact that we didn't continue the wall and make sure that we have a secure border is ridiculous. The fact that we create a literal pathway that if you want to come through and you want to bring fentanyl, like, you can look at the schedule of Border Patrol and know when they're switching. I saw myself, the scouts that are still out there for the cartel, that they watch Border Patrol and they're like, hey, radio in, okay, they're making their switch, and the new shift is coming on. Now, if you're going to do it, is the time to do it. It's ridiculous to me.
Well, but if their barracks is an hour away, they know they have a 2-hour window.
That's right. No, you're exactly right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, Southern Arizona is just wide open still because of that. At least it's not wide open for the mass migration as much because it's a hard journey through it, hot and dusty,
And you don't have a base camp there welcoming them,
but
like you used to have under Biden.
For fentanyl, for the drug traffickers, for the sex traffickers, for the professionals,
unfortunately,
it's a very open avenue.
Yeah.
What other issues are you hearing from constituents that are on top of their mind?
I think everybody, whether you're Republican or Democrat or independent, they want to make sure that these elections are secure. It's an 80% issue. Most of Americans want to make sure that they have secure elections, that only Americans are voting in these elections. President Trump has talked about the SAVE Act and that it's the number one priority. I believe that as well. And because it's such a popular issue, it should get done. And then waste and fraud. That should not be a partisan issue either. Getting rid of waste and fraud in government and our spending, our tax dollars being spent and being defrauded. When you look at Minnesota and you look at the Somali population, the fact that 80% after 10 years are still on welfare, that's ridiculous. It's not sustainable. And then you see all the fraud on top of that. And the American, the average American who's just trying to get by and pay their mortgage and, afford all their bills is saying, well, my tax dollars are being wasted. That's how I feel.
Well, controlled immigration with time for assimilation and an effort at it. Right? We always made an effort in this country to assimilate new populations. Right. And when you went to this idea about multiculturalism and you said all cultures are equal, we said assimilation is bad. We gave up our unity. We gave up our strength. Yeah. And then this is the kind of result you see.
Yeah, when you bring, hundreds of thousands, take the Somalia population in Minnesota, and you bring them in and you put them into one area, and because they got asylum, they got the right to vote, and they don't assimilate, then obviously you're going to have that section. And that's where I was born, in Minnesota, where you see this area fundamentally change. It does not look anything like not only the United States, but certainly Minnesota anymore.
Minnesota, that was one of, go back 15, 20 years, that was one of the crown jewel cities in the country. Minneapolis, St. Pete was gorgeous.
Oh, 100%.
I mean, it was, and now it's been trashed.
What are your thoughts on Iran right now?
I think we need to have a long-term perspective and not make judgments short-term. I mean, I am somebody who looks, and you guys are as well. We grew up, we saw the Iraq War. I believe that it was justified to go in there. And you look back afterwards and you say, we lost thousands of lives. We spent trillions of dollars. We didn't accomplish what we wanted. And nation building in the Middle East is a failed proposition. You can't do it. It doesn't work. And, that's the fear when you look at Iran and what's happening. I think you need to take a big picture, because if you look at it, from a global economic standpoint, and you look at the AI revolution that's coming and how we win that in producing more energy, and how we're behind with China in regard to producing energy, well, we just kicked the leg out from China, because they got 20% of their crude oil from Venezuela and Iran, and they only produce 10% of it in country, so they have to import 90%. And so, there are strategic benefits that are, I think, part of the administration's thought process going through it. And I just don't believe, the pushback is, that, Israel got us into this war and they pulled us along and we didn't want to, maybe there wasn't an imminent threat. But I think this administration is smart enough to look at it and say, if we do and we take this action, we know that it's going to increase oil prices short term. It's going to increase energy cost as a result. Inflation is going to go up as a result. And that is contrary to our entire message and the ability to win the midterms. So they had to have evidence, intelligence that said this was such a threat now that we had to take action. And I hope long term we're able to get in, get out, remove the greatest terrorist threat in this world that has been there for 50 years since Jimmy Carter, and then hopefully the Strait of Hormuz long term is much freer, and then gas prices are much lower as a result.
Well, the imminent threat is they have been one for 47 years.
That's right.
And I find that cowardly justification to say we shouldn't be in it to be absolutely illogical. They have been a threat. They have been a thorn in the side of the Middle East, which has taken so many U.S. resources,
lives,
blood, and treasure.
Yeah.
And so you don't need an imminent threat. They're just there, and they do Hezbollah. They're responsible for 10-7.
Right. Hamas.
I mean, we have the whole Gaza 10-7 thing because of Iran. If Iran did not give them money, which Obama helped provide them, there would have been no 10-7.
Yeah. Who provided most of the resources in Iraq? It was Iran.
100%.
Yeah.
Well, I would add something else here. I mean, look, Venezuela and Iran are different situations than Iraq.
Yes.
And we need to be very clear about this, because those are the two countries in the world whose populations are desperate for our help.
That's right.
To retake their countries.
And a majority pro-American.
And heavily pro-American.
Isn't Donald Trump the most popular political figure in Venezuela based on polling right
absolutely.
now?
Yeah.
So if you look at Venezuelan Americans, Iranian Americans, Jewish Americans, how could they ever vote Democrat again?
Well, Jewish Americans are always going to be.
I'm just saying though, like if you are a Jewish American, right. and the ones that I talk to especially, and they look at the support from the Democrat Party of the Palestinian movement, of Hamas, pushing back now and supporting Hamas and Hezbollah and willing, that we fail in Iran because it politically would benefit them. That is not an America that I believe in.
You know what the problem is? As a Jewish American, there are two Jewish Americas.
Yes.
There are Jewish Americans, and there are American leftists of Jewish descent, and they're not the same group, and they don't even mix that much, right? Like that's the Hollywood Jewish left versus the actual synagogue left, or synagogue Jews. And so as one of them, it is a tough message. It's like, how can you watch our people have this happen to them and say nothing?
Right. But you also have the Christians that go at Easter and Christmas, and that's it. And they're not the same as the Christians that are devoted to their faith.
Well, there's a reason we have sliding walls in every Jewish temple. Is what it is. Breaking Battlegrounds coming back.
All right, imagine this. You're running for president. Yes, president. What's the first thing you need? Well, besides the $1 million fundraising, you need to secure your web domain. You need your name, .vote. Easy to remember, straight to the point, and a direct link to your campaign. No, but seriously, whether you're getting out to vote or convincing people that yes, you can fix the potholes on Main Street, a .vote domain helps you stand out. It's not just a website, it's a call to action. Head over to GoDaddy.com or name.com, type in your name, .vote, and boom, you're ready to make a lasting impact. Get started today with your .vote web address.
Welcome back to Breaking Battlegrounds. We're continuing on now with Jay Feely. He is a candidate in Arizona's CD1. You can follow him on X at Jay Feely. We remember him also from some pretty darn good kicks with the Cardinals here.
That was fun. I mean, getting to play in the NFL was such a blessing. It was such a weird journey for me because I didn't get into the NFL right away. I spent 2 years out after college working. I became a financial advisor, and I was still doing tryouts, but I didn't get invited to training camp for 2 full years. And so I had a whole business that was going. I started my own office in Tampa and then finally got invited to camp and then went in, ended up winning the job. Bruce Arians, who became my head coach here at the Cardinals, his son, Jake Arians, was the young guy that they had in that they thought would be their guy, ended up beating him out and winning the job. And all of a sudden you're in the NFL. I remember that first year sitting at home, Chris Berman, I get my first game winner, and Chris Berman, we're watching ESPN highlights because back then that's what you did before social media.
Right.
And he's like, Jay, see me, touch me, Feely. I'm like, Chris Berman just gave me a nickname? Are you kidding me? I made it. Like,
So you beat out Bruce's son.
I did, yeah.
That's,
Probably hurt me when Bruce became the head coach.
Oh my gosh,
here,
that's amazing.
Then he cut me, got back at me.
So you know the story about Clint Eastwood, right? He was doing one of his movies, and his son, who looks a lot like him, tried out for it, and he gets a letter in the mail the next week saying you didn't get the part. It's just a letter from Clint, signed. And he called his dad. He goes, "Why didn't you call me?" He goes, "I can't treat you any different than anybody else."
Wow.
Wow.
Isn't that amazing?
I didn't know. Wow.
Yeah, no, it's incredible.
He became mayor.
Oh yeah, Carmel. Yeah.
Carmel.
Yeah. Oh yeah, he is still the mayor up there, what I understand. Let's talk about America's fiscal condition.
Sure.
Okay. There is, everybody we've had on the show, we asked a simple question: how much could you cut in government without people really noticing? It's always 10 to 20%. I mean, it doesn't matter who it is. They just said you can do this and still provide the same amount of services, right? And there'd be some cutbacks, but people who need it would get it, right? But how do we go solve this besides, the line waste and fraud? There's more to waste and fraud. We have a revenue problem. We have a spending problem. What do you think we need to do?
I don't think we have a revenue problem. I think we have a spending problem.
I don't think we have a revenue problem at all. But so, one thing Schweikart has suggested is sort of like, they had the Brock commissions during the military when they closed bases. He thinks there should be a commission.
Yeah. I'll tell you, for me,
yeah,
because I think the American people are demanding transparency and accountability.
Agree.
And you could cut 10 to 20%, but no one has the political will to do it.
Right.
We won't even go back to pre-COVID spending.
Right.
And when you look at the fact that we're at $39 trillion in debt, growing at $1 trillion every 100 days, pretty soon we'll be over $1 trillion a year just in our interest costs on our debt alone. It's unsustainable. But neither party has had the will to do anything about that. And so I think there's two things you can do. One, obviously, if you can keep GDP above 5%, you can try to grow your way out of it. And that's really the only real way that I think you could address.
But that only works if you keep spending
That's
from
right.
growing.
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, you have to keep spending constrained.
And then that's the second part. I think what we should have, and you have the technology to do it now, is that every spending that either the state or the federal government does should be on blockchain. And it should be available for the public to see. You can put it all out there. It's complete transparency. You can't hide. You can't put things into bills and make sure and hope that people don't know about it. If you put it all on blockchain and you had transparency and every single transaction is there for the American people to see, then you could have real accountability and you could see where every dollar is going. Because even the Department of War now, like, we should be able to go through there and make sure that dollars aren't getting wasted. Yes, we need to continue to increase spending now more than ever because we need to replenish, everything that was degraded and that we've used. so that we aren't in a situation where we don't have the right missiles, the right even drones and everything that we're doing right now to try to take on.
You need effective spending.
That we need effective spending. And so there should be accountability, and we shouldn't have waste and fraud. And I think if you put it on blockchain for the public to see, where people could go through it and they could hold the government accountable for where they're wasting the money, that would go a long way in cutting a lot of that waste and fraud.
One of the issues you brought up earlier is obviously data centers, AI. Arizona is kind of the epicenter of that. Yeah. There's been a lot of pushback, and this is one thing I've been concerned about lately, is that a lot of people on the right have seemed to have gotten roped in to the leftist green argument that data centers are so bad for the environment. The truth is not that
true
at all.
Yeah.
No.
How do you push back on that? Because that's a key element of the future growth in this state.
There's two. It is the key element to the future growth. I think when you look at TSMC and bringing their huge project in with $250 billion. You look at the $30 to $50 billion data storage centers that are getting built. You look at Intel and what they're doing. We want those businesses to continue to come here and for Arizona to be a hub for the future economically, because that's great for Arizona and all the jobs that entails, and then people being able to go out and buy homes and have an ownership stake in this state. I think, first of all, you have to understand the data. Like the average data storage center doesn't use more water than the average golf course, and nobody, pushes back.
It actually uses a lot less.
Well, they
nobody says,
they also
gosh, we
recycle
got
it.
too many golf courses here in Arizona. Well, and they do. And if you look at, Microsoft, like they have that recirculating where they recycle the water. All of them, I think, should go to that model and try to bring in that technology. You have to have investment from the data storage centers in the grid so that they're not increasing the cost for your local consumers. They should actually invest in it and try to decrease the cost, because then you'd have buy-in from the local community. If their energy costs are going down because we're getting a data storage center, that says, hey, we'll give back. And Chamath talks about that a lot on All In. Like, this is the model of how it could be successful. But we know that we have to compete with China to win this battle with AI, and the data storage centers and the ability to produce energy are key to that battle. And that's where the fundamental basis has to be, to talking to the people and saying, hey, this is how we're going to win economically and really security-wise as well. And this is why we need to be able to continue to bring those in and expand on that.
I don't want to gross out our listeners here, but a data center, if it's on the Phoenix water grid, you have no issues because the water gets recycled. Phoenix is now recycling sewer water back into taps. So sorry, folks, to let you know that is actually happening here.
That's why I have the filtration system at home.
Yeah, I recommend it. Maybe at least get a Brita pitcher. Look, I joke about this. The truth is they clean that water to a standard that it is absolutely pristine. We're going to have to get over our squeamishness on that kind of thing.
Isn't that a big fight in Scottsdale right now?
Yeah, it's a big fight everywhere.
I've seen it all over. I mean, Indiana had this major, massive data storage center that was going to be a boom to this town, and the local residents pushed back against it so much that they canceled the project. So what did they accomplish? Well, they accomplished getting rid of billions of dollars in tax revenue and thousands of jobs that would have been there for that local economy, and now it's going to come here or it's going to come to Texas.
Well, Jay, we have a minute here left with you, and your campaign manager will be mad if I don't ask this question. Why should people vote for Jay Feely?
I think at the core, they want somebody in government who doesn't need the office, who truly wants to go and be that civil servant. I didn't have to do this. I could have kept working for CBS and doing a job where I only had to work 5 months of the year and got paid really well. But I wanted to serve. And if you have people who aren't beholden to the job, that don't need this office, that don't need to get reelected, I do believe we should, have a couple of things. We should have a limit on how long you serve in office, term limits. I believe we should have limits on your ability to trade stocks. You should have to put it into a blind trust. You shouldn't be able to go and serve in a government office and benefit yourself and enrich yourself.
Correct.
And so that's what I'm first of all committed to, is going there and being a servant of the people. And then if you look at my life and my wife and I and what we've been committed to, it's always been about helping individuals, helping other people, utilizing the blessings that God gave us to help other people. And I'm committed to doing that in office too. And I think we need those kind of people in office.
How do people follow you?
jfeelyforcongress.com. You can go on there. You can see every single policy that I believe in. You can see stories about who we are. And then you can go on there. You can help financially as well.
Thanks a million.
Jay
Yeah,
Feely,
thanks for having me on.
you
It's
so
great
much.
talking to you guys.
Breaking Battlegrounds coming right back.
Sam and I are always talking about being prepared, whether it's hurricanes in Florida, earthquakes in California, flooding in Arizona, or supply chain disruptions.
Exactly, Chuck. When pharmacies shut down, it does not matter how tough you are, you still need access to critical medicine.
That's why we trust Jace Medical. The Jace case comes with 5 life-saving antibiotics and key over-the-counter meds, so you're covered when things get disrupted.
And Jace goes beyond just the Jace case. They also offer first aid kits, daily prescriptions, and long-term nutrition with Jace Pantry. Don't wait for the next hurricane warning or natural disaster. Take control of your health and peace of mind today.
Visit jace.com and use code FUTURE at checkout for $10 off your order. That's FUTURE at JASE.com.
In today's digital world, standing out is more important than ever. Whether you're running for office, leading a cause, or hosting a vote for the cutest pet in town, you need a web domain that's simple, memorable, and action-oriented. You need a .vote web domain. It's clear, impactful, and establishes a lasting presence for your campaign. Don't wait. Head to GoDaddy.com or Name.com, type in your name.vote, and get started today. Because after all, every pet deserves a web address that's as special as they are.
Welcome back to Breaking Battlegrounds with your host, Chuck Warren. I'm Sam Stone. Chuck, I always love having a candidate in here in studio.
You know, I'll tell you the one thing difficult about candidates, though, is I never want to go bust them. I mean, I want them to tell why they're running, things of that nature.
We want them to inform the public.
I mean, especially for the time we have. I just want them to tell people, and people can learn more. And I think sometimes people think we may be a little too soft, because I would like to follow up more on the fiscal condition of the country.
Right.
Because it's not a waste fraud. We have just issues, right? And it's going to take some hard decisions. But again, he's very articulate. I absolutely get why the White House and the NRCC are supporting him. He's an excellent candidate. You and I have said this both about him and John, who we've had on the show.
John Trobaugh, who's running also in that
I
race.
truly believe whoever gets out and meets the most voters will win that race, because they're both very likable and they're both very bright people.
Yes, and successful.
And so I can't stress this enough to them that they both need to be out.
Yes.
And shake as many hands as possible. And I know Arizona is really quite famous for this. I don't hear this in Utah or other states. But they're like, well, it's too big. I don't have time. Make the time. Have a cottage meeting every night.
Well, actually, so I can accept that argument if you're Juan Ciscomani with a massive district.
Right. His is compact.
Eli Crane also has a very large one. Gosar has a large one. But here's the thing. Gosar manages to get around. He touches bloody everybody in that district every single year.
So you can do it here.
You can do it here.
And that's just planning.
And CD1 is compact. It's small.
It is.
It is.
And it's got good density.
Right.
So you can do it. There's no reason for it. But I am convinced whoever goes out and does that wins that seat. Something today that just cracked me up. Canada has dropped to 25th in the 2026 World Happiness Report. They were 6th a decade ago. And they're noting factors like climate anxiety, so blame the government and their subsidized press for that. Stagnant wages, blame the government. Blame housing insecurity, blame the government. Eroded trust in institutions, blame the government. That is the result of Trudeau.
Well, and now Carney.
Carney.
I mean, no, the liberal left across the globe is ruining country after country. Canada is one of the most beautiful places on earth. They had a people with a very clear heart for service and for community, and they're ruining it.
Well, and these happiness indexes, to put an asterisk next to it, is, they have New Zealand number 11. Right. We both know New Zealand has people out migrating to Australia and elsewhere because there's a lack of jobs. So I'm always very dubious of these standards, of these metrics. But the reality is the same metrics that put Canada at number 6 a decade ago now has it 25 below the United States. And the United States is, look, we just have a third of this country just hate it no matter what.
Right.
Unless we become England, they just hate it.
Right.
And so I'd like to take them out of it and then just say, how are the rest of you who are so-so or love America? Right. And we'd probably be top 3, right?
Oh, for sure. For sure. Did you see,
by
the way...
Iceland's number 2, and they have 300,000 people. That doesn't even count. They shouldn't even count.
Did you see, by the way, that Mark Carney, the Canadian premier, announced the release of 25 million barrels of oil from their strategic reserve. Did you catch that?
Yeah.
They don't have a strategic reserve. They're the only OECD country that doesn't have a strategic oil reserve. So not only were you just completely full of it, but also let's talk about that number, 25 million barrels. That's like half a day in New York City.
Yeah, and there's not been enough. Of course, you wouldn't expect this from our national media. There's not been much pointed criticism of Biden just dumping our reserves in order to win an election,
which was horrendous.
And he just gets away with it. By the way, let's talk about. So Chuck Norris passed away, and as I was driving in this morning and talking to a friend, I said, I would feel very happy in my life if I could be as active, as in good a shape as Chuck Norris and die at 87. On the 10th of March, he was posting, still doing his silver.
Yeah, I got to say, from the recent experience of watching my father's decline, he was an active, healthy man late into his 80s and into his early 90s, but then by his mid-90s, I mean, his last 4 or 5 years were just horrendous. I'm with you. Give me good years and let's go.
Give me those good years. But look, Chuck Norris, even Benjamin the Prime Minister of Israel, even he praised him on Twitter this morning. I mean, that tells you the Chuck Norris influence. And by the way, folks, if you've never caught him, just Google Chuck Norris memes. They're the best memes in the world.
No, they're fantastic, obviously. Sad day, great guy, but yeah, I love that he got every last minute out of his life.
He did it his way.
An amazing life.
And passes away in Hawaii. I mean, that's a blessed life, right? It's not even some hospital. He passed away in Hawaii. I don't know if he's vacationing or living over there or what.
Well, look, as opposed to spending your last months in a hospice and in some white-walled place, this is fantastic.
Here's one. Chuck Norris hasn't died. He defeated life.
I love it. Folks, stay tuned. Breaking Battlegrounds, come back with more in just a moment.
Sam and I are always talking about being prepared, whether it's hurricanes in Florida, earthquakes in California, flooding in Arizona, or supply chain disruptions.
Exactly, Chuck. When pharmacies shut down, it does not matter how tough you are, you still need access to critical medicine.
That's why we trust Jace Medical. The Jace case comes with 5 life-saving antibiotics and key over-the-counter meds, so you're covered when things get disrupted.
And Jace goes beyond just the Jace case. They also offer first aid kits, daily prescriptions, and long-term nutrition with Jace Pantry. Don't wait for the next hurricane warning or natural disaster. Take control of your health and peace of mind today.
Visit jace.com and use code FUTURE at checkout for $10 off your order. That's FUTURE at JASE.com.
In today's digital world, standing out is more important than ever. Whether you're running for office, leading a cause, or hosting a vote for the cutest pet in town, you need a web domain that's simple, memorable, and action-oriented. You need a .vote web domain. It's clear, impactful, and establishes a lasting presence for your campaign. Don't wait. Head to GoDaddy.com or Name.com, type in your name.vote, and get started today. Because after all, every pet deserves a web address that's as special as they are.
Welcome back to Breaking Battlegrounds. Our next guest up today, Richard Salzman, is the founder and president of Intermarket Forecasting, Inc., a professor of political economy at Duke University, senior fellow at the American Institute of Economic Research, and a senior scholar at the Atlas Society. Richard Salzman, welcome to the program.
Glad to be here. Thank you so much.
Hey, first question that has nothing to do with our conversation. You teach at Duke. Do you fill out a basketball bracket every year for March Madness?
I do, and it gets broken very early.
I would almost assume that is a required product at Duke. Like, how do you not do that? Like, if you're employed there, do they?
No, the more interesting question I get is, since you're a professor there, can't you go to any game? Answer: no. No. You have to be a major donor or blah blah blah. Which university? Professor?
Hey, universities are there to make money. So look, is America still a capitalist nation?
Good question. It's usually called crony capitalism. So the first thing people have in mind is, well, this must just be a system of by and for capitalists. And since Marx told everybody that capitalists exploit the worker or exploit the third world, or I guess the environmentalists would say they exploit the earth, Their view is that can't be a very good system because it's for one group, and worse than that, a parasitic group. I think a much better definition of capitalism would be something like a social system. I don't think it's just politics and economics, by the way, but because it includes like what kind of government. I think it's a liberal in the good sense, free economy, free society where there's no anarchy. It's a government is limited to what the founding fathers talked about: life, liberty, property, the pursuit of happiness. So a constitutionally limited government that allows people to be free, not only in civil matters, but economic matters. Now, it's definitely geared to things like the profit motive and love of commercial life. And it's a very secular, sometimes people would say materialistic. Or here's another one, individualistic. So there'll be conservatives and leftists alike who are a little uncomfortable with it. But that's how I would characterize it. And we haven't really been that for the last 100 years or so. It was definitely America for the first 125 years, especially after we abolished slavery. I mean, capitalism doesn't go with racism and slavery, as some critics say. So we've been moving away from it. And I would, just one last thing, not to filibuster, I would say most of the things people complain about, cost of living, schools, healthcare, is the government intervening in these sectors and not leaving it to purely capitalist motives and incentives.
Well, let's talk about government intervening regarding public schools and universities.
Yeah.
They just seem to, look, not everybody's the same. Obviously, you go to Duke, you don't feel this way, but there seems to be a significant plurality of professors and administrators who just don't like America, who don't like our system of government, who don't like capitalism. Is this a false accusation by me?
Not at all. That's absolutely true. And if you went back 100 years and went to Harvard, Yale, Duke, you would not find that. So those of you who know the history, the progressive era, I hate that word actually because they're not really for progress, was roughly 1890, 1920. That's when academia and intellectuals changed from capitalism and individualism and gung-ho American spirit, gave way to the Constitution shouldn't be restricting what the government does. You owe duties to the broader public or others. You don't have your own. The income tax, the Federal Reserve, all the things that came into being in World War I. I mean, we're talking about 1913, where all the major features of what we have as a big kind of gargantuan state today began there. Of course, expanded under FDR, expanded under LBJ with the Great Society program. So that, except for like a decade or so, I was a big Reaganite. The Reagan years were great. The 80s, even some of the 90s, there was this 20-year respite where we were moving, back toward a more capitalist system, but the last 25 years definitely the other way, especially after 9/11. So that's actually the theme of my book. For those who want to read it, I have a book out there a couple of years ago called "Where Have All the Capitalists Gone?"
Okay.
And I think what's interesting is if you ask the average American what's a capitalist, you know what they'll say? It's someone who works on Wall Street.
Yes.
They'll say,
Right.
or a venture capitalist. It's very interesting because if I say I'm a capitalist, they'll say, what bank do you work at? But if I say I'm a socialist, what will they say? I'm an advocate of socialism. See, what I'm trying to get across to people is, no, I'm an advocate of capitalism. Yes, I'm in the finance business or I'm at academia, but we need to get to a point where people either know what the system is and then defend it, like in the way a socialist would defend socialism. And that's what I think we've lost. When I queried, like, where have they all gone? I meant the intellectual, ideological capitalists like Ludwig von Mises or Hayek or Rand or Nozick or Milton Friedman. There's about 10 major figures who in the middle of the last century brought us that wonderful period in the 80s and 90s where, hell, the Soviet Union went away and the U.S. economy freed up and the supply side revolution occurred. It was a really very good. So ideas really matter. They matter to me. And I think that's a big. So the ideas are not pro-capitalist as they once were in the 80s and 90s. We're trying to revive that.
Is one of the issues, it seems like if you think of it in three factions, sort of traditional capitalist, crony capital, and then socialists,
yeah.
Two of those have built-in lobbies and agendas, right, that can be manipulated through government. The third doesn't. True capitalism doesn't. So how does it push back when the other two are able to utilize the levers of power so effectively?
Really good question. The way I would put it is, and the reason I'm sympathetic to why people think they shouldn't be pro-capitalist, because they do see lobbying, they do
Right.
see lots of money being spent, right? Put it this way: I once wrote an essay that to get money out of politics, get politics out of money making. So now understand what I'm saying here. I'm saying the rich and these big companies, they wouldn't spend a dime on these stupid politicians, in my view, unless the politicians had influence,
Right.
huge influence, right? And so they're influence peddling. So it's always seen as some rich, bastard is contaminating these otherwise pure angelic public servants, with bribes and with lobbying. I think what actually happens is universities and ideologues and intellectuals basically advocate for bigger government intervention. The politicians run on this. The public schools teach the students that that's what they should be looking for. Then, when the government massively intervenes, on tax rates and regulation and trust busting and all the things we know they do, the alphabet agencies, right? Those are definitely going to affect rich people. In fact, they're often
Right.
targeting rich people.
Right.
Soak the rich, and the naivete out there is that the rich will just stand there and not do anything about it. So I'm stressing the idea that this is call it a supply side driven problem, namely the supply of interventions and taxes and changes coming from the government is eliciting a response from those affected. Otherwise, they would go about their business and leave government alone. So the solution to this is not get rid of the capitalists or shut them up or make them not, have campaign finance freedoms and things like that. The solution is to get the government out of the economy.
Yes.
And by the way, just this is more philosophical, but this might interest you. When someone says we need more equality of income, if I say to them, you know what, the natural state of affairs is that people differ in their interests and their capacities, and just on a free market alone, you're going to end up with differences, in performance, and not just economic. I mean, it could be differences in who wins the Academy Awards, or who wins sports competitions, right? So I'm saying inequality in that regard is natural. But notice what would happen if your standard was, I'm going to equalize the results. You'd actually have to treat people differently in the law. So that pressure for that egalitarian pressure to equalize results actually ends up with them corrupting what we used to say is the rule of law, and everyone gets treated equally before the law. That goes out the window. And the minute you have unequal treatment on the law, guess what? People show up to Congress and say, really? You need to treat me better or worse. I'm favored or I'm not favored. And it's really sad, because you could summarize it this way. You very same people who are demanding equality of result are the cause of the lobbying, because you're creating a legal system, which everyone knows is corrupt today, just in the tax system alone, right? If you're rich, you'll pay 60, 70%. If you're lower income, you pay nothing. That's different treatment. That's different tax treatment. But the same thing kind of happens on other things. The 14th Amendment said everyone shall have equal protection of the laws, right? Everyone will be treated equally. But if you set up a system where, no, we're going to treat you unequally so that we get equal results, all hell breaks loose, and it's just deuces wild.
We got 4 minutes left here with you. A subject I want to talk on. I'm glad that President Trump has effectively closed the border. Sam and I are also big proponents of legal immigration, where we assimilate people coming into our country and bringing that energy, that creativity, and so forth to it. And how do we get balance on this? There are some that just no immigration at all, and I think that's foolish and
Not in the interest of this country.
No, not at all. And then there are those who are like, oh my gosh, let's just let everybody in who wants to come in. I totally disagree with that, and we're seeing the results of that with some terrorist acts and so forth. What do you think is the immigration system that gives hope to people to pursue the American dream, and at the same time makes them productive members of our civilization here?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And the first options you named is an example of like a false choice. It's not your fault. It's the false choice we're given. Close the borders or completely open the borders, right? So each side is able to point to the other as being ridiculous. But not just to split the difference for the sake of splitting the difference. We need managed borders. There was I call it the Ellis Island model, because everybody knows what Ellis Island is when we process people into New York City. And the processing, very detailed, very specific. I mean, we have records to this day of who came in, when they came in, where they're going. They didn't go on the welfare rolls right away. So you have immigration, but then you also sort for no terrorists, no criminals, no diseased people. I mean, if they're diseased, you can send them to a hospital, I suppose.
Right.
Usually the demand was something like, do you have family here? You know, is anyone vouching for you? Are you coming from a country that's an enemy of America? I mean, you know, if during World War One, you
Right.
see what I mean? So I agree with you guys entirely. I think we need managed immigration, and I don't have any problem. I'm not a nationalist, nativist type that says we need to keep some pure mix of what America is.
No.
But if we keep advocating the idea that, hey, to be American and Americanism, which I love as much as I do capitalism, those features are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That you are not a parasite on others, that you're not criminal. That's just basic stuff, and that you try to contribute something to the society you're joining, and you assimilate. You're coming to this country,
Right.
presumably. You're fleeing other countries
Yes.
that don't have values. Okay, so, but I think the leaning of the Biden people let everyone in, including a lot of dangerous people. We're seeing these sleeper cells now. But the other approach of Trump, I'm okay with Trump in this case because it was so bad when they opened the borders to everything.
Right.
But I'm a big advocate and supporter of ICE, which I guess that makes me a bad guy too in academia and elsewhere. Because to me, the E in ICE is enforcement.
Right.
I'm all for law enforcement, but notice the same people who want to defund the cops want to defund ICE. So the only parts of government they want to shrink is the actual functions government should do, namely upholding and defending the rule of law and law and order. You know, they won't shrink the Department of Education, the Department of Energy, or the Federal Reserve, or these other things. So it's a very twisted.
You know, the funny part about that, because those same folks are always lining or presenting themselves, I guess, as champions of the common folk, right?
Yeah.
But we have countries all over the world where law and order has been allowed to break down, and what happens is the common folk pay the price. The wealthy
Right.
huddle behind guards and gates and
Yes.
get wealthier. So
Right.
they're creating
There is
systems opposite to their
There is
intent.
there is also this phenomenon that Milton Friedman years ago pointed out, and he said, "Well, when we had open borders, when we were a more capitalist country, and there was no welfare state, the people who came here really knew there's not going to be any social safety net.
Right.
They had to
You come here, you're going
bust
to
it.
work your ass off, or you're going to have convince your uncle to help you out, or something like that." And he said it is a problem that when you start developing this welfare state, it becomes a magnet for freeloaders.
Yes. Yes.
Now, is the solution to that to shrink the welfare state so we don't invite freeloaders? Well, I'm all for that. I want the whole damn thing removed. But so it becomes a delicate thing because it's almost like you have to do two things at the same time. You have to have a more rational border policy and immigration policy, you know, with these checks on
And a
things.
more rational benefits and welfare policy. Richard Salzman, thank you so much. We really love having you on the program. Look forward to having you back here again in the future. Folks, follow him at richardsalzman.com.
I say this every election cycle, and I'll say it again. The 2024 political field was intense, so don't get left behind in 2025. If you're running for office, the first thing on your to-do list should be securing your name on the web. With a yourname.vote domain from GoDaddy.com, you'll stand out and make your mark. Don't wait. Get yours today.
Welcome back to Breaking Battlegrounds. Our next guest up today, Aaron Sibarium, staff writer at the Washington Free Beacon, graduated from Yale, where he's the opinion editor of the Yale Daily News. Before joining the Free Beacon, he was an editor at the American Interest, and he's done an amazing series on this Maryland condominium, Chuck, that this is like a nightmare horror story of government incompetence on every level.
It's like something from The Wire.
It is exactly something from The Wire. Aaron Sibarium, welcome back to the program.
Thank you for having me.
So tell us what's going on with this thing, because I probably a lot of people aren't aware of this, but this is just from start to finish a disgusting and astounding story.
Yeah, so basically there is a condominium in Prince George's County, Maryland, and right next to the condominium for over 2 years has been this homeless encampment, which at its peak reached about 50 people. And members of the encampment routinely break through the fence, break into condominium buildings, smoke crack in the stairwells, defecate in the hallways, and make life miserable for the residents of the condo. And this continues over time. The county doesn't do anything for years until it reaches a breaking point in November 2025, when allegedly some members of the encampment broke into the boiler room and destroyed the heating system for half of the complex. Now, at that point, the county, rather than clean up the encampment, deems the buildings without heat unfit for human habitation and orders the legal residents of the condominium to leave. So the law-abiding citizens of the condo are in danger of becoming homeless as a result of damage allegedly wrought by this homeless encampment that the county refused to clear for over 2 years.
But
and
not
the
just
condo is
refused
now
to clear, like your reporting is the county was helping support this encampment.
correct. Yes, so that is the other side of it. The county would regularly deliver food to the encampment. And that is actually the centerpiece of a lawsuit the condo has now filed against the county, arguing that the encampment was a state-created danger because it was sustained in part by these food deliveries, and that the county knew about this. They'd gotten all sorts of police reports, but they continued to feed the encampment, knowing full well the damage it was inflicting on the condominium.
Well, what I thought was interesting is in your article there was a gentleman who was saying, well, there's no statistics that the homeless are creating these crimes, and then the residents say, well, of course not, because they don't arrest them. They just immediately go up to them, cite them, but they don't cite them. They don't arrest them. And then there was some people think they're trying to do it so the building just goes bankrupt and then they can sell it to make more money. Do you think there's any reality or proof to that?
It's obviously hard to know because there's no hard evidence. We don't have anything in writing from county officials. But, it's anecdotally, it's not completely insane or implausible, right? And there was actually another condominium a few years ago in Prince George's County that was hit with a lot of safety violations similar to this one, and then ended up going under, and the county did ultimately sell it to a pricey developer to redevelop it. So it's not crazy. I mean, I don't want to overstate, right? We don't have any hard evidence, but you can also see why people would suspect that there are ulterior motives at play, given that the county has essentially launched a kind of legal campaign against the condo, due to damage, again, that the county ignored and arguably abetted with these food deliveries.
So explain to our audience, who is the demographic of this condo? There was one family that you quoted that had been there 40 years as a family. Who's the demographic of and do they own these condos or do they just rent these condos? I mean, who are
many of them own, although there are renters. So because they own it, this is the other thing, their home value has basically been destroyed.
Sure.
Right, which is terrible. I would say both from everything residents tell me and from my own on-site visits there, it is overwhelmingly minority, a lot of Black and Hispanic people. Many of the Hispanic people do not speak English. They're recent immigrants. So these are not rich folks by any means. These are in many cases, very poor people struggling to get by, who've invested sort of what little they have in their homes, and now their homes are effectively worthless as a result of this encampment.
And how long has this been going on? When did this encampment first pop up?
It began over 2 years ago, although it seems to have grown and kind of reached a peak probably sometime in 2025. It's a bit smaller now because under political pressure and as a result of, I think, sustained media attention, the county has undertaken a few sweeps of the encampment. The problem is that every time they sweep it, it just kind of starts to reconstitute itself. right? So, at this point, I was there a few weeks ago and saw 30 to 40 people. It's still pretty big.
Let me ask you this. As you go there, do you feel safe walking around?
It depends where you walk and what time of day it is. So during the day, on the side closest to the condo a few weeks ago, during the day, it wasn't too bad, actually. And I walked around and talked to some of the homeless people there. And, one of them smoked crack right in front of me, but, he wasn't physically harassing me.
Was he a good host, though, and offer you some as well? Was he a good host, though?
And I didn't request any. But, I also did go at night at one point, late at night. And that I did not feel so safe. I mean, I actually wore I can't believe I did this, but I got a bulletproof vest because I had heard there was a lot of gang activity in the area, and I just wanted to be really safe.
Right.
And, I was glad I had that on because I saw right in front of me a guy in a Cadillac who was clearly a drug dealer. It looked like he was delivering drugs to the encampment, or, he certainly wasn't homeless, but he was, visiting with the folks, and they clearly knew him. And, he looked right at me and lit a cigarette and waited in his car for a few minutes before driving off. And that was a little unnerving. And then later in the night, I got solicited by a prostitute. So look, it was fine, but yeah, at night it was not good.
So sounds like a perfect place to raise a family. And there was another time where I actually, during the day, I'll just say, I went into it during the day when there were 30, 40 people around and tried to talk to some of the homeless people. And within 2 minutes, someone told me to leave, and I complied, obviously, because there were enough people around that if they wanted to start something, I would have been in physical danger. So yeah.
Is a Marylander, are the residents of the Marylander charged an HOA fee?
Yes.
Okay.
And they are in fact charged they are charged higher condo dues now because of all this property damage, because the property managers are trying to obtain financing to clean up everything.
So
and that's created a...
So my understanding is Prince George County is refusing to guarantee a loan that the condominiums sought. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right.
And what's their reasoning? I mean, can they refinance the condo and get the money they need for repairs unless the county guarantees it? And the county's obviously allowed this type of activity to happen around.
Well, if you're a bank, are you going to loan money in this situation?
So explain to our audience.
Well, right, that's the problem.
Yeah, explain that to our audience.
So the banks are not going to loan unless there's an unconditional guarantee by the county because of how dilapidated this property is and because of the ongoing risks from the encampment. The county has said it's not going to lend to guarantee the loan, and then it's also refused to help the condo apply for federal Section 108 assistance. And the reason it's refused to help them apply is because it claims that it's in active litigation with the property management company, which is technically not true. It's actually in active litigation with the condominium itself over the safety violations that it's using to try to evict people. But so it's really Kafka-esque. They're saying, well, we can't help you apply for money to help fix up the condo because we're in effect suing you over the damage to the condo that it sort of indirectly caused by our inaction.
You can't even make this up. I mean, what are the alternatives for these people who own these condos if it's foreclosed on or they go bankrupt? What are their options?
I mean, they're in a pretty bad situation, and honestly, the problem for some of them is that they've been ordered to vacate. Some have left, although many people have stayed put. But if people leave and try to get a hotel or something, they're still going to have to pay their condo dues legally. Right. And many of them, look, I mean, they're upset about that because they can't afford it. They just cannot afford that. No. So, yeah, I mean, I'm not really sure. I guess they can try to sell it, but who's going to buy? They're in a really bad situation, and the county isn't really giving them any help.
we got you about 4 minutes more here. So you were on a podcast recently talking about identity politics under Joe Biden and Donald Trump. Can you discuss a little bit on that podcast, what your viewpoints are on that regarding racial bias in medicine and affirmative action and so forth?
Sure. There has been quite a bit of racial bias in medicine and in many professions, but especially in medicine over the past 5 years as a result of DEI programs. I think two of the most extreme cases have been one at UCLA Medical School. There's a big scandal about all the affirmative action they were doing in admissions, and that's resulted in now a lawsuit by Students for Fair Admissions, which the Trump administration has joined. And the other case that I like to point out, because I just think it was among the most shocking, is that in late 2021, early 2022, several states triaged monoclonal antibodies and COVID antivirals using race-based criteria. So if you were non-white, you got like 2 extra points, which was about the same weight that they gave to, conditions like obesity or diabetes.
Wow.
And and I mean, this is something that I think some people have forgotten, but it's one of the most clear-cut examples of the excesses of wokeism. And it really wasn't that long ago.
That's fascinating. One last question here, and this is more of you informing our audience. So, folks, Aaron's with the Washington Free Beacon. We've had him on. He does great stories, great reporting. How do you go pitch a story like this Marylander story? And how does your editors and so forth say, yeah, go up there and you may need a bulletproof vest one day, but how do you go pitch these stories and how does it get approved? Because obviously you're getting a paycheck and they want you to produce something people will read or we'll get you on the radio and talk about it. And by the way, folks, we're going to post these articles on our website today. But how do you go pitch that story and get approval for it? Because it's a unique story and it should be, frankly, the Washington Post should have done this story, right? But how do you go pitch it and get it approved?
Well, I'll just say parenthetically, the Washington Post was investigating this, and then the reporting team involved, I think, got fired as a result of the Bezos purge.
Okay.
Just
wow. Okay.
Little trivia for you, but that's what I've heard. But how do I pitch the story? Look, I try to do my due diligence first, right? I talked to the property managers. I got a lot of documentation and kind of summarized the info for my boss, and the higher up said, yeah, this sounds interesting, go out there, it's worth pursuing. The bulletproof vest, I must say, I got that of my own initiative. I just was like, kind of made my own risk calculus and was like, there's MS-13 graffiti everywhere. I'm going to go at night. I'd probably like
reasonable
to have a little protection, but yeah.
Yeah. How'd you twig to, last question, how'd you twig to the story in the first place?
Just, basically the property manager reached out to me.
Interesting.
And it sounded interesting, and I got in touch and just started chatting with them, and then saw a lot of the documents and videos, and then I did kind of my own follow-up and interviewed residents and did more digging. This
story is sort of everything about government incompetence at every level, and you don't want to assume it's malice, but something is broken in the system when people, inside government, how do they not see the suffering of these residents and say we have to prioritize them too?
Yeah, well, I think from their perspective, what they've tried to do is they blame the property managers and say, well, you haven't fixed the locks, you haven't done this or that. The problem is that a lot of what they're asking the condominium to do, it doesn't have the money to do.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have the money, again, because the county is kind of refusing to provide financial assistance. And banks are really spooked by this property at this point.
Amazing story. We're going to be keeping up on it. Aaron Sibarium, thank you so much for joining us once again. Folks, follow him on X at Aaron Sibarium, or obviously also at the Washington Free Beacon. Stay tuned. Breaking Battlegrounds coming back with more in just a moment. Welcome back. Our next guest up today, Timothy Manella, is the Goldwater Institute's Director of Higher Education, and he is Tim, have we had you on the program before? I think we have, right?
I've been on once before. Great to be back.
Yes, indeed, and thank you so much for joining us once again. You have some new reporting out Chuck wants to get into because it ties to him and his family also. But tell us generally what the Goldwater Institute does and what your role there specifically is for folks, in other states who may not be as familiar with this.
Yeah, we pursue liberty and individual rights in all 50 states and defend the Constitution in all 50 states. And my role is focused on returning our public universities to be actually serving the public instead of a narrow ideological slice of the public. And that's what we tried to reveal here in this report on the honors colleges at Arizona public universities.
Oh, that's great. So I want to talk about Barrett College here, but I have a real more personal question. What Philadelphia sports team breaks your heart the most, since you're a Philadelphia sports fan?
It's a great question. The most frustrating right now is the Philadelphia Phillies. The most depressing consistently is the Philadelphia 76ers. But it is a tough battle. For them. I'm okay with the Eagles right now. The Eagles get a pass.
Well, the Sixers, that's really painful.
Does being a Philadelphia sports fan make you more a person with faith, or does it make you agnostic? What does it make you?
So I believe George Will talked about how his friends were St. Louis Cardinals fans, and they all became liberals because everything was happy and sunny, and he was a Cubs fan, so naturally he became a dour conservative. So that might have something to do with it, that I am a conservative. Yep.
All right. Well, Timothy, so my daughter, my oldest daughter, went to Barrett Honors College, and she had a good experience, but that was almost 10 years ago.
That's the Arizona State University.
Arizona State University Barrett College, which is highly ranked, is it not, Timothy, in rankings for an honor college?
That is true. It does show up pretty high consistently in rankings, like you say, of best public university honors colleges, yes.
So, but you've done some research, which I believe, because we had... Who was that idiot professor we had on here 2 years ago that you and Michelle got into it with from Barrett?
Oh, I forget the name.
We've had this debate before 2 years ago then. He just denied any of this was happening. Tell us what you have found out now with your investigation about what Barrett College is doing.
Sure. At Barrett, they have a required honors course called the Human Event. It's a 2-semester course. And the Human Event course is marketed as students are going to engage with really challenging classic texts. They're going to engage with Plato and Aristotle and Martin Luther King and the Constitution, Federalist Papers, and all these important texts. What we found is that many professors, and they're given wide latitude to select the text that they're going to teach. Many of them are just filling up their course with readings on identity politics, on social justice activism, and on DEI in general. And so we took a look at what's actually being taught we looked at the syllabi of these courses, and that's what we found, is that contrary to the public-facing advertisement for it, it's chock full of DEI. And we have to ask ourselves whether this is actually enhancing the education of the most talented students who sign up for this honors college.
I don't know, Timothy, the exact program they're getting. Obviously, the curriculum varies from teacher to teacher. As you're saying this, I had a flashback, an unfortunate one, to my undergrad schooling at Lewis and Clark College in Portland, Oregon. They had a 2-semester course called Inventing America, and the professors had wide latitude, and they let it be taught by people who were not history professors, and I got some women's study professor. And so we got nothing but, she taught nothing about men. Like, she would not talk about men for the entire year. It's supposed to be a course about the creation of America. So you get this, like, super distorted view, right? And you're missing all the great great documents you mentioned, the thoughts, the debates that led up to the creation of those documents get thrown out the window.
Yeah.
Isn't this like the sloppiest form of biased thinking?
I agree completely. What is particularly distressing, I think, is and disappointing is that Arizona State has a system in place that students can view the syllabi of these courses before they sign up for them.
Okay.
We found that up to 85% of course sections in this required human event course, they did not have syllabi attached to them. This means that students are signing up for these sections that they're required to take. If they're in honors, they're required to take. They're signing up for them, and they, in many cases, would have no idea that what they're signing up for is a DEI indoctrination session, not an engagement with the great works of literature in world history. And that is something that needs to change. There has to be mandatory transparency here so that students make informed decisions about what courses they're going to take.
So how do you go about having that mandatory? Is that a legislative action? Do parents need to demand it? I mean, how does that come about?
Well, this is something that's particularly annoying, really, I think, and it should annoy legislators and students and parents, is that Arizona State has the system in place. You can go on Arizona State's website right now and go to any particular course, and there's a good chance that there will be a syllabus there that you can see what's actually taught in the course. So the administration, if necessary, the Board of Regents, if necessary, legislators, they need to step in here and say there's an expectation, a basic expectation that if you teach in our school, you should provide your syllabus to the students prior to them signing up for the course. That should be a basic expectation.
Not only should it be a basic expectation, but I guess my other concern with this is not just, giving students an avenue to avoid this DEI indoctrination,
right. Yeah.
But the foundational principle of having this course in the first place is that it gives you a basis in American institutions, in the thoughts and the academic discussions that created those institutions, that created the Constitution and all of our systems. And that's being left aside, too. So it's like double damage here.
That's correct. You take a look at what is being assigned in these courses. I'm sure you know this book, certainly. This book is called Post-Colonial Love Poem, a classic. This book apparently talks about how America is predicated on the diminishment and ultimate erasure of bodies like the authors. There are readings on so-called compulsory heterosexuality and lesbian experience. There's an essay assigned on demarginalizing the intersection of race and sex. You can see that these are not the most significant works of that talk about American institutions and the Constitution and Western civilization. These are very narrowly focused on identity politics and a very narrow ideological perspective. And it really is not delivering this excellent supplement to a university education that the Honors College says it's doing.
No, I would go so far as to call those things essentially a grift. I mean, the entire premise, I think, behind DEI, and you may have a very different opinion or maybe not, but my view of it is that largely it was a way to extract money, resources, and prestige for academic inquiries that didn't deserve any.
Right.
I largely agree with that. That I think here's what I think is how this was sold is that there was a defensible movement to say that we should study groups that are not the elite, right?
Sure.
We should study women. The history of women and the relationships between women and men throughout history. We should study that, and we should study various ethnic groups and their histories and their struggles, and that all is defensible. But what I think you see when you take a larger look at this is that sort of defensible academic movement, which I think almost no one would disagree with, was kind of a cover for this Marxist-inspired view that was inserted into these inquiries, which says that the entirety of our society is this big rigged game that is designed to keep minorities and women down. And that is the purpose, that is the intention of our society and our institutions. This is false, obviously.
Right.
But that is the framework through which all of these academic inquiries are being performed. And it's unfortunate.
You know, I was just thinking about that, Chuck. I would bet you in the last 20 years the U.S. has minted more non-white male billionaires than white male billionaires.
Oh, we should look that up. Last question for you, Tim, and we got to let you go here. The Barrett Honor College at Arizona State is named after Craig and Barbara Barrett. He's a former CEO of Intel. She is the former U.S. Secretary of Air Force. She's Republican. He's Republican. They do a lot for our community. Has anybody reached out to them about this type of thing being taught under their name?
I'm not certain about that, but I would say that it's an excellent point to make, that these institutions were often founded by philanthropically minded individuals that wanted to provide excellent education to the most talented students, no matter their background in the state of Arizona and in various other states. And I think what we see here, this is just one shot of the honors colleges in one state, but we could do this for a number of other states, is that these institutions have been hijacked for an ideological crusade. They are getting far away from their original purpose of providing an excellent education to the most talented students at these institutions. And that's what we need to get back to by providing greater oversight and greater transparency for these institutions.
Timothy Manella, I think we're going to let that be the last word because that was perfectly said. I don't think it could be said any better right there. Folks, follow Tim on X at Tim Manella or at goldwaterinstitute.org. And Breaking Battlegrounds will be coming back with more in just a moment. All right, welcome back to Breaking Battlegrounds. Our final guest up today, Bess Byers, graduated from Washington State University, and she is a reporter for Reason. We've had her on here before. She does amazing work, and we are thrilled to have her back. She's got a great piece out. Why is it so hard for the military-industrial complex to build an electric mail truck? Bess Byers, thank you for joining us. And why is it so hard?
Hey, thanks for having me. That is the multi-billion-dollar question. It seems like this is a common theme with the military-industrial complex, whether it's Boeing with a soap dispenser or the $10,000 toilet seat. Now they're using a postal truck to swindle taxpayers. I think the big issue is that, these projects, when they give out the money, it's billions of dollars with such little oversight that it's very easy for them to not be held accountable, for the money to get lost. Similar to this story, about a year ago, I did report on Boeing. They got busted it was like an astronomical amount for a soap dispenser. And the only way that Boeing would even cooperate with the investigation is if they were able to redact the price per unit of this soap dispenser. So there's absolutely no accountability. I mean, it's like they almost know that they can just do whatever, charge whatever, and get away with it, which is an insult to taxpayers.
Well, so, yeah, I mean, tell us what about this, what is the background of this electric mail truck contract or the attempt to build it? And then I guess my question is, why didn't they just call Amazon and say, can we buy yours?
Well, Rivian has their own set of issues with their EV trucks. But what started this is, the postal fleet, I guess Northrop Grumman was the ones that built the first postal truck, 20, 30 years ago. I'm 38. Some of the post office trucks are older than I am. And so, I believe it was one of the Biden it was a make jobs program essentially. And they spent all this money to, have all these jobs created and they wanted to EV everything and make everything green. And so they had this idea that they were going to, refurbish the postal fleet, and a percentage of that needed to be electric vehicles. And again, why they didn't just turn to somebody that's already manufacturing electric vehicles is beyond me. That would have been my obvious pick. But instead, they went to this defense contractor and gave them the contract. And it was interesting because the numbers kept changing when they gave it to him. It was anywhere between 65 and 165,000 EVs. Then it was 55. Then it was 45. Jeez. And so it was just kind of a green energy scam where they're going to use electric vehicles to give all this money to this company, and of course taxpayers would be the ones footing the bill for it. And of course, then it turned out when they got the contract, they didn't even have a facility to build the vehicle. So it was kind of this, no worries, we'll build the facility, we'll hire all these people, we'll make it happen. And then once they got into the building process, they were having all these issues with airbags and leak tests, and water was leaking into the vehicles. And so obviously then the project was getting pushed back and delayed, and they weren't meeting the deadlines. But it was interesting because Ram, Ford, and Mercedes also got contracts to build postal trucks. Theirs weren't EV, they were just your standard delivery vehicles, and they had no problems meeting the deadlines. But for some unknown reason, this military contractor was not able to get the job done.
Well, I understand the history of them having built postal trucks before, but who cares? Like, how on earth do you look at that and say, we're not going to put this up to just a normal competitive bid process?
Yeah, I mean, I have no idea. I drive a Toyota 4Runner, and it's mind-boggling to me that they didn't just get Mercedes Sprinter vans or
right. Yeah.
And even if you look at the new vehicles, I mean, my mindset goes to, okay, and again, I live in the mountains in Idaho, so I know that some of the roads out here are not the best. It gets very cold in the winter. So what's going to happen in the wintertime when it's -10 and you've got this EV that's delivering the mail trucks? And some of them too, they're not very high off the ground. So I'm just wondering what's going to happen if you're in rugged terrain. It seems like the project was not really thought out. And here's the other thing that's interesting is John Podesta was very influential in helping make this deal happen. And we all know John Podesta, the Podesta brothers have a pretty long history of lobbying and shady connections, amongst other things. But the Postmaster General, Louis DeJoy, even when this deal went through, he said that he personally benefited from the collaborative spirit of John Podesta, which makes me wonder, was there some sort of money transaction behind the scenes? Like, what's going on? And why is Podesta the head of energy innovation?
Right. Yeah, he appreciated the collaboration in a Bahamian bank.
Yeah. Exactly.
So one other thing, I mean, so this is a thing here in Arizona too, right? Because when it gets hot, these things don't work very well. The battery bleeds out in a hurry. And we had a test with a bunch of our cities were running out to get electric buses, and fortunately reality set in and they've all shut up about it, and you haven't heard a thing about electric buses in the last 2 years because they just do not work. They have range that's tiny and they need constant repairs, all these things. How are the trucks that they bought from the others? Is there any information out there? They were delivered on time. Are those running fine? Why wouldn't they just change course now and say, okay, we're done with this and we're just going to buy more of the things that actually work?
Yeah, I think that's what's happened. A couple politicians did introduce legislation to claw back the funding that they'd already received, but obviously some of it has been spent. So I'm assuming if they are successful in getting that money back, that's the course they'll have to take. I'm not sure if there's been any issues with the vehicles that are currently on the road. Somebody in the comments on my video on one of the platforms said that there have been instances of these EVs catching fire or having problems. So it'll be interesting to see what transpires if they do end up putting more of them on the road. And I have a feeling you're probably right. We'll see them either dying in the cold or overheating in the heat.
I have a great friend I grew up with who's a firefighter, and he is terrified of electric vehicles.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, he and his crew, like...
Well, they're hard to put out.
They're not just hard to put out, but every interaction with them, you risk getting electrocuted in that situation.
Oh, my goodness.
So, and then you have to dunk them in a water tank and leave them there for 30 days. I mean, it's just insane.
Wow.
I have a question before we go to the next one here. So you spent time in China, correct, Bess?
Yes.
Have you heard from any of your friends in China about what's going on in Iran? I'm just interested in a perspective of some people you may have worked with, if they've talked to you or emailed you. I mean, what have you heard?
I haven't heard anything from my colleagues. A few of them follow me on Instagram, and so I know that they are seeing the content I'm putting out, but I've not spoken with any of them about what's going on in Iran.
Okay, perfect.
It was an interesting question, just because you're right. I haven't heard the opinion, any sort of.
I always like to know the opinions of other countries. You know, I travel a lot, and it's always interesting to hear what they think. So, anyway.
So, Bess, the other thing you've been covering quite a bit lately is flock safety. Tell people what this is, because I don't think it's a new company. I think a lot of people don't know. It's something you and I are totally simpatico on this one. These things are one of my bête noirs. So tell people what this is and what's going on.
I think, first of all, a lot of people don't even realize what they are. They see them and they just think, oh, it's another traffic camera. Maybe it's got a solar panel on the top to make it, operate better. Like when I first reported on these, so many people had no idea what they are. But what flock safety is it's an automatic license plate reader. And what they do is they take pictures of every passing vehicle, and they're not just gathering plate data. They're gathering information like bumper stickers, color of the vehicle, any damage, things like a missing hubcap. And then all of that information gets uploaded into a giant shared database, which can be accessed by law enforcement and government agencies. And originally, when I first reported on these, Flock said, oh, they're not being used for immigration enforcement. It's just for things like, say, for example, someone steals a vehicle or there's a murder or something like that, that then they'll access Flock.
Yeah, there's a silver alert and they're trying to find grandma.
Yes, exactly. And it was interesting because when I first reported this, so many people said, oh, well, they should only be used for immigration enforcement. But I'm old enough to remember life before 9/11 and TSA, where so many people said, oh, but like, we should have TSA. It'll stop terrorism. And I don't think that sacrificing our privacy and our freedom for perceived safety is a good thing. And now we're seeing this with Flock, where AI intelligence has its problems.
Right.
For example, one man, I believe he was in Ohio, Flock misread his plates. They, I believe, said that the 7 was a 2. And so they pulled him over, alleging stolen plates. He was very confused. His plates weren't stolen. But they pulled him out of his vehicle, made him get on the ground. Then they said he was trying to get up, so they sicked the police dog on him. He went to the hospital. Then they put him in jail. And then it turns out, oh, oops, our bad, we got it wrong. Or another woman in Colorado where they accused her of stealing a package from somebody's porch because they saw her drive 25 times in one day on the Flock cameras. And so stories like this are becoming more and more common, of a Flock just getting it wrong, or you're creating this surveillance state where everybody becomes a criminal just because they're going to and from work. And then on the flip side of that, you have police chiefs and police officers using this technology to stalk and spy on their current or ex-partners. It's being abused. The cameras are easily hackable. You can hack them in under 30 seconds. For the longest time, they didn't have two-factor authentication. They're also, you can essentially turn them into your own personal spyware system once you hack them, so you're able to view it in real time. So it's just this massive overreach of surveillance and just data grab. And so now there's starting to be this pushback of people where they're very angry, and we've got vigilantes going out and cutting them down, destroying them. It's been very interesting to see what's happened with Flock, and people don't want them either.
No, there's a huge pushback right now here in Arizona, and unfortunately, I think the governor will end up vetoing it. But I think she's going to have a bill land on her desk that would outlaw the use of these. And there have been some incidents of vandalism here. But one of the other concerns I've had with this, because everything is a copycat industry, right? You mentioned that these are different than a lot of the automated traffic cam systems that people have grown accustomed to. The problem is, if this is something that is in demand by government, isn't it almost certain then that these normal intersection cams and the others, they're going to add this technology into them as well?
Assuming they don't already have it.
Yeah, well, my assumption is they do, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're right. I know in Washington State, somebody filed, I believe it was a public records request. And so that kind of changed things up, where essentially this guy was filing public records requests because he wanted to know exactly what the cameras were gathering on him. And some agencies complied, other agencies turned off their flock cameras. But essentially the ruling was, Flock says they destroy the data after 30 days, but this ruling from the courts is now requiring them to keep the data, I'm assuming indefinitely. So now it's like, okay, instead of having the data for 30 days and then deleting it, allegedly, now they're keeping it to build another mass surveillance system. And it also poses a safety risk to people. You could easily file public records requests if you are interested in stalking a partner and you're not a police officer. Anybody can file a public records request, and then that gives you the ability to track someone, their comings and goings, and it's putting people at risk.
Well, and as you and probably most of our listeners know, government doesn't always operate with the best of intentions, right? And one of the issues here that I see is this data they're gathering is also commercially very valuable. Mm-hmm. And not all jurisdictions and not all states have the same concern about protecting privacy. When these companies come to them and say, hey, we don't even need you to pay us for these cameras, we just need you to let us use the data, there are going to be places that agree to that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, even look at their partnership that they had with Ring cameras. They had partnered with the Ring doorbell and then ran that creepy Super Bowl ad.
Yeah, exactly.
And then everyone's like, wait a minute, you're able to access my Ring camera to scan for my dog. Like, what else are you doing? And luckily they canceled that, but it just makes you wonder, what else are they teamed up with? And it's not just flock cameras, mounted to a pole. They've got drone surveillance. They have things that are listening detection, so they can listen for gunshots, but then also human voices. So it's very invasive.
They have the shot spotter technology. As I understand, too, they have now mobile units for the cruisers, for police units to have on board.
That doesn't surprise me at all.
Last thing, before we let you go here, maybe the lesson to take away from this. We're entering a very uncertain and potentially dangerous age with AI and surveillance and the information that's out there that is accessible to government and individual corporations and institutions. Do people need to be really, really cognizant of this right now in talking to their legislators and promoting and pushing for laws that rein this in? Because I feel like, and Chuck, you and I have talked about this a little, I feel like we are on this knife edge.
Yes.
Where how AI gets used in the future could either be very freeing or could be the end of free society.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that it's something that, in my opinion, it happened so fast. All of a sudden we went from, I guess I wouldn't even call it AI, where it's like, Google suggested search results. Now they're analyzing my Google Drive folders and telling me what's in them. Or, there's like AI on Instagram where I post a video about something and all of a sudden you can tap and it's pulling up all this other information about me. I think we are, like you said, on the cusp of kind of a tipping point. And I think with flock cameras are a great example of that. Also, I've been seeing that apparently in 2027, now all new cars are going to be equipped with some sort of data gathering system that transmits that to the government. Imagine that now being tied in with AI. It just is a very dangerous, slippery slope. And so I think that we do need to have some laws in place to ensure that this technology is not being abused and and used to violate our rights.
100%. Best Buyers, thank you so much for joining us once again. We love having you on the program. Anytime you have something like this, let us know. We want to get you back on. This is great stuff, so we really appreciate you taking the time.
Hey, thank you for having me. I've got a good batch of California content coming out real soon.
Oh, great.
So-
Yeah, please contact us. Love to get you back on. That'd be
absolutely.
fantastic. Best, be good. Stay out of trouble. I don't think you are, but stay out of trouble.
Thank you so much. You too.
All right. Well, great show today, Chuck. I
It was
think
fantastic.
everything was, our guests were phenomenal. I can't thank all of them enough. Great discussion. So, folks, you're listening to this right now. Send this to a friend. Post this on your social media. Share this out there so we can keep the lights on, pay the bills, and keep bringing you unbelievable interviews like all of the ones today. Breaking Battlegrounds will be back on your air next week.